But here's the big news this morning. Senate Democrats have done it. After more than a year of negotiations and dead ends, Democrats have passed a reconciliation package that includes a bulk of their priorities.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the bill, as amended, is passed.
No Republicans voted in favor of the final bill. It passed with a tie-breaking vote from Vice President Kamala Harris. The bill went through some last-minute changes during an overnight vote-a-rama. That process allows senators to suggest amendments to the bill before a final tally. 7 Democrats, including Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, voted in favor of a last-minute tax change introduced by Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota. That led Democrats to scramble to replace that measure with one of their own. The final draft of the Inflation Reduction Act would invest more than $300 billion in the climate reform, the largest in American history. The bill allows Medicare to negotiate drug prices for the first time, cutting prescription drug prices for Americans 65 and older. It also adds a new 15% minimum tax on large corporations. The Inflation Reduction Act will now head to the House. Leadership there has announced lawmakers will return from the August recess on Friday to vote on the bill. Senate Republicans were able to keep one key item out of the Inflation Reduction Act. They voted to block a cap on insulin costs for millions of patients across the country. So they kept to their brand, let's just say. Democrats had tried to limit those costs at $35 for private insurers. Only 7 Republicans joined all Democrats to try and keep the cap in place. Many of the 43 Republicans who blocked it had a different take on this in the past, including Senator Joni Ernst just 2 years ago.
The skyrocketing costs of prescription drugs has become a matter of life and death for so many. We've heard the heartbreaking stories of individuals who could not afford their insulin, were forced to ration and skip doses, and as a result, they lost their lives. Iowans have been very clear with me where they stand on this issue.
So she cared until she didn't. So that's another Republican branding thing. Just flip against something. The bill does include that cap for people 65 and older on Medicare. And Joe, I just want to start with how big a win this is. The name of this bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, everything seems to be lining up in a way that has really brought this together for Democrats, hopefully, ultimately, in a way that Americans can understand, that they have been working on their agenda and they got it done.
Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, you look at the work that they did on first of all, I got to say with Joni Ernst and the other Republicans that voted to allow Big Pharma to keep gouging diabetics. My son, type 1 diabetic, I can afford it. Unfortunately, so many Americans have to make really tough choices on insulin, and a lot of Iowans get screwed by Joni Ernst and Americans by Republicans. It's grotesque. It's absolutely grotesque. Hypocrites and liars for backing down on that. But you look at what they did, Mika. The New York Times talked about how it capped a remarkably successful 6-week stretch that included the approval of a $280 billion industrial policy bill that bolstered American competitiveness with China, the largest expansion of veterans' benefits in more than 2 decades. This bill achieved the Democrats' longstanding goal of slashing prescription drug costs, allowing Medicare for the first time to negotiate the prices of medicine directly and capping how much Americans pay out of pocket for these drugs. $400 billion for climate and energy programs. I mean, it will allow the U.S., think about this, altogether to cut greenhouse gas emissions greenhouse gas emissions by about 40% below 2005 levels at the end of the decade. That's just unbelievable. And you look now at Joe Biden, and I know we're going to talk about this, but you look at these Democrats, a 50-50 split Senate. And you look at Joe Biden, suddenly you have this huge climate change plan, this huge plan to lower drug costs, to help Medicare recipients. Well, the head of the Republican Senate's talking about increasing costs for Medicare and Social Security and taxing poor and middle-class Americans. You've got this. You've got an economic rescue plan that's led to the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. You've got a massive bipartisan infrastructure plan that was passed. You've got the first significant gun safety legislation passed in over a decade. We've got the Electoral Count Act that was reformed to prevent future January 6th. You've got the China Competitiveness Bill, $280 billion to make sure that we can have a stronger semiconductor manufacturing base in America so we're not dependent on China. Confirmation of the first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then this package, Mika, which is landmark.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no doubt. You look at what happened in the 10 years before Joe Biden stepped into the White House. The last 6 years of President Obama's administration and Donald Trump's time in the White House. Joe Biden has done more than them, not combined, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. This has been an extraordinarily successful 2 years legislatively. Any way you cut it, even Republicans have to admit this privately, and they are.